The sound comes before the sight, skin against skin, sharp, final. Vivian's hand is still raised when Yiwon's fingers close around her wrist. He didn't decide to move. His body decided before his mind caught up, the way it used to on the nights when a bullet was already halfway to someone before he'd finished thinking about pulling the trigger. Naomi doesn't touch her own cheek. She doesn't step back. She stands there with her chin level and her eyes steady, like a woman who has already priced this moment in and paid for it in advance. "Let go of me." Vivian's voice comes out silk smooth even now, even with her wrist locked in his grip. He doesn't let go, not yet. The staff in the hallway have gone still the way people go still around gunfire, not frozen from shock, frozen from experience. They've learned the shape of danger in this house. They know better than to move first. "Why?" Yiwon says it low, not to Vivian, to Naomi. Naomi's jaw tightens just barely. "It's fine, sir." It is not fine. His grip on Vivian's wrist tightens without him meaning it to. "Why did she hit you?" Vivian laughs, the practiced, glittering laugh she uses at galas, the one that makes rooms warm to her. "She dropped a tray on the Baroque console. Do you know what that table is worth?" "I asked her." Yiwon's eyes don't leave Naomi's face. Naomi holds his gaze a beat too long for a housekeeper. Long enough that something passes between them that has no business being in a room with his fiancée still in it. "The table is fine," Naomi says quietly. "I'll clean it up." She turns to go. And that's when Yiwon lets go of Vivian's wrist, releases it like it had stopped mattering the second Naomi looked away. Vivian smooths her sleeve down, unbothered, already rebuilding the smile that will greet the dinner guests in an hour. "You're making a scene over furniture." "I'm not thinking about furniture." He watches the door Naomi disappeared through a moment too long. "Get ready for dinner." She goes, and the hallway holds its breath a little longer before anyone dares to move. 3 weeks before the slap, none of them would have believed this house could hold this many lies. Yiwon had built his life on the principle that control was the only currency that couldn't be counterfeited. He controlled his territory, his men, his face in every room he walked into. He had not lost his composure in 4 years, not when his brother's funeral procession moved through the rain, not when 3 of his lieutenants defected in a single week, not once. Vivian Cho had been the one exception the world was allowed to see. Beautiful, composed, born into a family with old money and older instincts, she made public devotion look effortless. Reporters loved her. His men respected her. The wedding was 11 weeks away, and no one, not his mother, not his advisors, not the men who'd have died for him, had ever once suggested it was the wrong match. No one except Naomi Carter, who had never suggested anything at all. She'd come into the household 18 months ago, hired quietly through an agency that vetted for discretion above all else. She kept to the edges of rooms. She remembered which of his aunts took sugar and which took none, which lieutenant flinched at loud noises and needed his tea poured without ceremony. She never asked him anything personal, not once, not in 18 months, which was, he realized much later, the loudest thing about her. He noticed her the way he noticed silence in a room that should have had noise in it. Something about her didn't fit the shape a maid was supposed to have. She moved like someone who had once commanded a room herself. He told himself it wasn't his business. He told himself that for longer than was strictly true. Dinner that night is unbearable in a way only Vivian can make a room unbearable. Smiling, gracious, cutting Naomi down in small increments disguised as compliments. "Naomi has the patience of a saint," she tells the guests, swirling her wine. "I could never let someone speak to me the way I speak to her and stay so calm about it." A ripple of polite laughter moves around the table. Naomi refills a water glass without looking up. Yiwon watches her hand, steady, unshaking, and wonders how long a person has to practice stillness before it stops being an act of will and starts being armor. "You'd be surprised what people can carry," Naomi says quietly, setting the pitcher down, "when they've decided it isn't worth putting down in the wrong room." The table goes quiet for half a second too long. Vivian's smile doesn't move, but something behind her eyes recalculates. Yiwon says nothing. But he doesn't stop thinking about that sentence for the rest of the night. Across the table, a man in a gray suit, Deputy Han, one of the family's longest-serving lieutenants, a man who sat at Yiwon's father's table since before Yiwon could walk, watches the exchange with more interest than a dinner guest should. He says nothing either, but his eyes move from Naomi to Vivian and back again, like a man recalculating his own private arithmetic. No one at that table notices him do it. That will matter later. The morning after the slap, Yiwon finds Naomi in the east kitchen before the rest of the house is awake. She's already dressed, already working, moving through the space like she owns the quiet of it. "You didn't clean up," he says. "The console." "I did, early." She doesn't turn around. "You didn't need to see it twice." "That's not what I meant." He steps further into the room than he needs to, close enough that she has to acknowledge him or make a point of not doing it. "I meant, you didn't defend yourself." "There's nothing to defend. I dropped a tray." "You didn't drop anything." His voice drops low, the register he uses when he wants a lie to feel unsafe to keep telling. "I've watched you carry 12-place settings up a spiral staircase without a rattle. You don't drop trays." For the first time, Naomi turns around, and there's something in her face he hasn't seen before, not fear, not deference. Calculation. The look of a woman deciding, in real time, how much truth a room can survive. "Some nights it's easier to be clumsy than to be right," she says. That's not an answer. "It's the only one you're getting this morning." She turns back to the counter, and the conversation closes like a door not slammed, just quietly, firmly shut. He doesn't understand it. Not yet. But it sits in his chest like a stone dropped into still water, and the ripples don't stop for the rest of the day. He starts appearing in his own house differently after that morning. The way a man appears when part of him has started keeping a second set of eyes on everything. He notices things he'd trained himself not to notice in years. The specific silence Naomi keeps when Vivian enters a room, the way her shoulders set half an inch higher, the way she times her exits so she's never alone with his fiancée for longer than a task requires. He notices, too, that none of the other staff carry themselves that way around Vivian. Only Naomi. He tells his head of security to review the household cameras. Not because he suspects anything specific. He tells himself that, at least. But because a man who has survived this long survives by not ignoring the things his gut refuses to let go of. The footage shows nothing dramatic. Small things. Vivian correcting Naomi in front of guests for mistakes that don't exist. Vivian assigning her tasks at hours designed to keep her from resting. Vivian, once, standing far too close and saying something the audio doesn't catch, and Naomi's face going carefully, deliberately blank in response. It isn't proof of anything, but it's enough to make Yiwon start asking a question he's never had to ask about anyone in his own household before. What is she protecting herself from, and why has she never once asked me for help? He also notices, scrolling further back into the archive than he means to, Deputy Han in a stairwell with his phone pressed to his ear at 2 a.m, 3 separate nights in the same month. The footage has no audio there either. He flags it, tells himself it's nothing, and doesn't mention it to anyone. That decision, to sit on an instinct instead of acting on it, will cost him more than he can imagine yet. She starts appearing in his peripheral vision more than a housekeeper should. He tells himself it's proximity. She's simply where the house needs her to be. But he starts inventing reasons to walk through the east wing at the hour she restocks the linen closets. He starts noticing the low hum she makes when she thinks no one's listening, an old gospel tune that doesn't belong anywhere near the cold marble of this house, and somehow makes the marble feel less cold. One evening, he finds her on the terrace after the staff have gone. Looking out at the harbor, lights like they belong to her. "You're not supposed to be out here," he says. Not a command, an excuse to speak. "Neither are you. Not at this hour, not without 4 men trailing you." He almost smiles, almost. "I sent them ahead." Bold, she doesn't look at him, trusting the dark that much. "I'm not trusting the dark." He moves to stand beside her, closer than propriety requires, close enough that he can feel the warmth coming off her skin against the cool sea air. I'm trusting that whatever's out there tonight isn't more dangerous than what's already inside my own house. Naomi finally turns her head. In the low light, her eyes hold something that looks almost like a warning for him, not from him. You'd be surprised what's more dangerous, Mr. Kang. The way she says his name, formal, correct, and somehow still intimate, like she's choosing to keep the distance rather than lacking the nerve to close it, does something to him he doesn't have language for. He wants, in that moment, more than he's wanted anything in years, to close the 6 inches of space between their hands resting on the railing. He doesn't, but he doesn't move away either. You say things like that and then say nothing else. It's a strange kind of honesty. Maybe it's the only kind I'm allowed right now. Her voice is barely above the sound of the water below them. Allowed by who? She doesn't answer that, and they stand there long enough that the silence stops being awkward and starts being something else. Something neither of them names, both of them feel, and only one of them is allowed, by every rule of this house, to act on. When she finally leaves, she pauses at the door long enough to say, without turning around, "Good night, ye one." Not Mr. Kang, not sir. Just his name, quiet and unguarded, gone before he can decide how it makes him feel. He stays on that terrace, a long time after she's gone. Queens, if you just walked into this story for the first time, I need you to know you picked the right room to sit in tonight. Something is already cracking open in this house, and it hasn't even started to bleed yet. Welcome, whether you've been with me through every story or this is your very first night here, you belong in this one. Tell me where you're watching from tonight, because I want to know exactly who's in the room with me while this unfolds. And if this story has already gotten its claws into you the way it did me writing it, like it right now, follow along so you don't miss where this goes, and tell me down in the comments the moment something in this story doesn't sit right with you, because trust me, it shouldn't sit right yet. Not even close. The ledger surfaces on a Tuesday, in the most unremarkable way anything ever surfaces. Tucked behind a drawer of old receipts, Naomi is asked to clear out for an accountant's audit. She finds it because she's thorough. She reads it because 18 months of watching, this house has taught her that nothing arrives by accident. Shipping manifests, dates, a name that doesn't belong to Yiwon's organization at all, a rival family, the one whose men had ambushed his brother's convoy 2 years ago on a night that was supposed to be secure. And beside the dates, in Vivian's handwriting, notes, times, confirmations. Naomi sits with it for 11 minutes before she moves. She doesn't call anyone. She doesn't run to Yiwon. She photographs every page with a burner phone she bought with cash 6 months ago, the same week she started asking herself if she'd made a mistake taking this job at all. Her hands don't shake while she does it. They start shaking after, alone in the linen closet, the door locked, the phone hidden back in the lining of her coat where it's lived since the week she bought it. Because here is the truth Naomi Carter has been carrying since the 3rd month of her employment. She didn't come to this house by accident either. She came because her cousin, a shipping clerk for the rival family, disappeared 4 months before she was hired, disappeared the same week he'd mentioned, offhand, a woman close to Kang Yiwon who fed information both ways. Naomi came looking for answers. She stayed because she found something she didn't expect to find. A man who, underneath the ice, was not what the stories said he was, and a fear that if she came forward with half-proof, she'd vanish the way her cousin had. So she waited. She endured Vivian's cruelty in silence because silence was armor, because a maid who complains is a maid who gets replaced, and a maid who gets replaced can't finish what she came here to do. She didn't expect to fall for the man she came here to investigate. She sits on the edge of her bed that night longer than she means to, the photographed pages glowing faintly on the screen in her lap, and whispers to the empty room the sentence she's been avoiding for weeks. I wasn't supposed to fall for him. That wasn't part of this. No one answers her. The house stays silent around her, the way it always does, keeping her secret the same way it's kept every other one buried inside its walls. What Naomi doesn't know, what no one in the house knows yet, is that the drawer she was asked to clear wasn't an accident either. Vivian had noticed the ledger missing 2 days before Naomi ever found it, not because she'd misplaced it, because someone had moved it, shifted it from the locked cabinet in her private study to a drawer of receipts no one should have had reason to open. Someone who wanted it found, but wanted it found by someone else's hands, so the blame would land anywhere but their own. That someone is Deputy Han. He'd found the ledger himself, months earlier, going through old files during a routine audit no one asked him to run. He hadn't told Yi-won. He hadn't told anyone. Instead, he'd sat on it, the way a man sits on a card in a game he hasn't finished playing, waiting to see which way the wind would turn before deciding which family he still owed loyalty to. Planting it where Naomi would find it wasn't kindness. It was a test to see who would move first, the boss or the woman closest to him, and which direction the house would fracture. He didn't expect to fall in genuine terror the moment he realized how fast it was already moving. Yi-won finds out about the ledger before Naomi can decide how to use it, because Vivian finds out first that it's missing. He's summoned to his own study by his head of security, who lays it out plainly. Someone has copied documents tied to his brother's death, and camera logs show only one person in that hallway during the window it happened. Naomi. Bring her, Yi-won says. His voice doesn't shake, it never shakes, but something behind his ribs does. When she's brought in, she doesn't deny it. She doesn't perform innocence the way Vivian would have. She stands in front of him with the same steady chin she had the night of the slap, and she says only, I can explain, but you're not going to want to hear it from me first. Then who? His voice is quiet in the way that used to precede men disappearing. Who am I supposed to hear it from? Her. Naomi's eyes don't waver. Ask Vivian where she was the night your brother's convoy was rerouted. Ask her why the manifest changes match her handwriting. I didn't take those pages to hurt you. I took them because I've been trying to prove what she did since before I ever met you. For a long moment, Yi-won says nothing. The room holds its breath around him. Every instinct that has kept him alive for a decade is screaming at him that the woman standing in front of him, the maid with the burner phone and the stolen photographs, is the danger in the room. But he doesn't feel danger. He feels something closer to grief. The specific grief of realizing the ground has been tilted under him for longer than he's known. Say it again, he says, slowly every word. And she does, the cousin, the disappearance, the reason she took this job in the first place. Every piece of it laid out flat and without embellishment. The way a woman speaks when she's rehearsed a confession in her head 100 times and finally has to say it out loud. When she finishes, the silence in the room stretches long enough that his head of security shifts his weight, uncertain whether to stay or leave. Leave us, Yi-won says, not looking away from Naomi. The door closes, and for the first time since she walked in, Naomi lets her shoulders drop, just slightly, just enough that the exhaustion of 18 months shows through the cracks. You should hate me right now, she says quietly. I don't. His jaw is tight, his voice rough. I don't know what I feel right now, but it isn't hate. The confrontation with Vivian doesn't happen with shouting. It happens in the wine cellar, of all places. Because that's where she's gone to hide the second copy of the ledger. She doesn't yet know Naomi already photographed. Yi-won finds her there, a bottle in one hand and a folder in the other, and something in her face shifts the moment she sees his eyes have already changed. The ice has gone somewhere else, somewhere she recognizes because she helped put it there. You knew, he says, not a question. I know a lot of things, Yi-won. She sets the bottle down carefully, deliberately, like a woman buying seconds. I know your brother trusted the wrong lieutenant. I know territory disputes don't resolve themselves. I know that in this world, someone always has to be sacrificed for the rest to survive. You gave them the root. His voice is a blade with no edge left to catch light. You gave them my brother. I gave them a variable in an equation that was always going to end badly for someone. She doesn't flinch. This is the version of Vivian no camera has ever caught, flat, calculating, entirely without the performance she's spent years perfecting. I did what needed to be done to secure the future of both families, ours included. You would have done the same if you'd had the stomach for numbers instead of blood. 2 years. He can barely get the words out evenly. 2 years I mourned him next to you. You held my hand at his funeral. And I meant every second of it. For the first time, something like sincerity crosses her face. The most chilling thing she's said all night, precisely because it might be true. Grief and strategy aren't mutually exclusive, Yi-won. I loved you enough to build us a future. I just built it on ground you weren't ready to look at. And the maid, his voice sharpens. Why her, specifically? Why did you go out of your way to break a woman who never once fought back? Vivian's mouth curves, not a smile, something colder. Because she watched me the way a hunter watches something it's tracking. I felt it the first week she was hired. I didn't know what she wanted yet, but I knew she wasn't just staff, so I made her life hard enough that she'd either break or leave. Her eyes flicked to him, sharp. She did neither. That should tell you something about her. It tells me everything I need to know. He looks at her, really looks, maybe for the first time in 3 years, and understands that the woman standing in front of him has never once, not in a single moment of their relationship, been afraid of him. And that terrifies him more than any enemy ever has, because it means she never once believed she needed him to survive. Word finds its way through the house before nightfall, not the full truth, not yet, but enough to shift the temperature of every room Yi-won walks into. His men look at him differently. Some of them look at Vivian's family alliance and start doing quiet math about which side of a war they'd rather be standing on. Deputy Han is the first to come to him, not with loyalty, but with an offer dressed as loyalty. Let me handle the transition quietly, he says, in the study, his voice smooth in a way Yi-won is too distracted to fully register as wrong. I'll secure her assets, freeze what needs freezing, keep this from turning into a war between families. You focus on the wedding that isn't happening. Let me handle the rest. Yi-won, exhausted, grieving a fresh grief on top of an old one, agrees. It's the first mistake he's made in this entire unraveling, and it's the one that costs him. Because Deputy Han doesn't freeze anything. He warns her instead, quietly moving funds, alerting contacts, buying Vivian 3 days of head start dressed up as due diligence, hedging his own future the same way he's hedged it for months, waiting to see which side would still have a throne left to offer him loyalty to. He finds Naomi again in the East kitchen. The same room, the same hour, like the house keeps circling them back to each other whether either of them asks it to. You could have told me the day you found it, he says. And you would have believed the housekeeper over the woman you were marrying. Naomi doesn't say it cruelly. She says it like a fact she's had a long time to sit with. I needed proof strong enough that you couldn't look away from it. One conversation wasn't going to be that. I would have believed you. He says it before he's decided to, and the honesty of it surprises them both. You don't know that. Her voice softens just slightly, just enough that he catches it. You didn't know me, not really, not until tonight. I knew enough. He steps closer, the same closeness from the terrace, the same 6 inches that had felt like a canyon and now feel like nothing at all. I knew you hummed old songs when you thought no one could hear you. I knew you remembered which of my men needed quiet mornings and which needed noise. I knew you never once asked me for anything in 18 months, which should have told me everything, and I was too much of a coward to ask why. Naomi's breath catches, small, involuntary, the first crack in her own composure since the night of the slap. Why does it matter now? Because I want to know the rest of you. His hand comes up, slow enough that she could stop him and doesn't, and rests along her jaw the way he's wanted to since the terrace and told himself he had no right to. Not the housekeeper, not the woman with the burner phone and the proof. You, all of it. For a moment, neither of them moves. The air between them is thick with everything that's gone unsaid for a year and a half. Every glance held a beat too long. Every excuse to be in the same room. Every silence that had nothing to do with duty, and everything to do with 2 people who'd been circling something neither was allowed to name. You're still engaged, she says quietly. Not a rejection. A warning about what it would cost them both if this went further tonight. Not for much longer. His thumb traces the line of her jaw, and for the first time in years, his voice isn't the voice of a man who runs an empire. It's just a man's voice, uncertain and low. I'm not asking you to wait for that to be finished before I tell you the truth. I've been in love with the way you move through this house since the 3rd month you worked here, and I let myself believe it was nothing because I didn't think a man like me deserved something that quiet and that real. Naomi closes her eyes for one long second, not in refusal, but like a woman steadying herself before she lets a wall down that took 18 months to build. When she opens them, there are tears there she doesn't let fall. "Then finish it," she says. "Finish it clean. And come find me after if you still mean it in daylight, not just in a kitchen at midnight." He doesn't kiss her. Not yet. He wants to, every part of him wants to close the last inch of distance between them. But he understands, in the way he understands the weight of a decision that will outlast the moment it's made in, that she's asking him to prove this isn't just grief and adrenaline wearing the shape of feeling. So instead he presses his forehead to hers, just for a moment, breathing the same air, close enough to feel her heartbeat where his hand still rests at her jaw. "I'll come find you," he says. "In daylight, I promise you that." She steps back first, has to, or neither of them will, and the kitchen feels 10 degrees colder the moment the space between them opens back up. "Queens, I need you standing with me for what's about to happen, because what Naomi does next is going to split this comment section clean in half. She has spent 18 months absorbing cruelty in silence to protect proof that could bring down the woman who orchestrated a man's brother's death. And now she's the one asked to wait again, while justice gets handled by someone else's hands. Tell me, do you stand with her for choosing patience over vengeance one more time? Or do you think a woman who's carried this much should never have to wait for anyone to catch up to what she already knows? Like this video right now if you're standing with Naomi tonight, and drop your answer in the comments, because I genuinely need to know where you land before I tell you what Vivian does next. Vivian doesn't run in the way the household expects her to. She's too controlled for that, too much a strategist to disappear in a blind panic. Instead, she spends her borrowed 3 days making calls to lawyers, to her family's allies, and to Deputy Han, whose warning gave her exactly the head start she needed to move what mattered before anyone came looking for it. Yiwon doesn't learn about the warning until the 4th day, when his security team finally traces the wire transfers Han claimed he'd frozen and finds them long gone instead, moved through 3 accounts in 2 countries, untraceable past the second hop. He confronts Han in the same study, where the man offered to help. Han doesn't deny it. He doesn't even look particularly afraid, which is its own kind of confession. "I've served this family for 20 years, Han says. "I wasn't going to bet my future on a war I didn't know you'd win." "You didn't bet on me at all." Yiwon's voice is quiet, and quiet on him has always meant something worse than shouting. "You bet against me and called it caution." Han says nothing. There's nothing left to say. He's escorted out of the house within the hour, stripped of every title he'd held since before Yiwon was born, and the men who watch him go understand, without being told twice, exactly what indecision costs in this family now. But the damage is done. Vivian is gone, not hiding somewhere Yiwon's people can reach, not waiting in a cell for a reckoning, gone in the way that means she took the money, the leverage, and the 3 days Han bought her, and used every hour of it. The room where Yiwon gathers his inner circle that night is quieter than it's ever been. The ledger sits on the table, the photographs beside it, and for the first time in years, he has to tell the men who have followed him that the enemy in front of them got away. "She's gone," he says, no dramatics, just the flat truth of it. "She has resources, she has time, and she has every reason to come back at us from somewhere we won't see coming." One of his older lieutenants, a man who served his father before him, speaks the question everyone's thinking. "And Deputy Han? Gone from this family, permanently?" Yiwon's eyes don't waver, even though something behind them is heavier than it was a week ago. "He taught me something I should have already known, that hesitation is its own kind of betrayal. I won't make that mistake with anyone else in this room." The men nod, slower this time, more solemn than relieved. They understand, watching him, that this isn't a clean victory. It's a war that simply changed shape, quieter now, further away, but not finished. Somewhere out there, Vivian Cho is still alive, still resourced, still exactly as dangerous as she was the day she orchestrated a man's death and smiled through his funeral. Yiwon carries that weight out of the room with him, but for the first time, he doesn't carry it alone. He finds Naomi exactly where he said he would, in daylight, on the terrace where this began, the harbor lights replaced now by the flat gold of late afternoon sun. She's not wearing the uniform. She's in her own clothes, sitting on the railing like she's finally allowed to take up space in a house she spent 18 months moving quietly through. "You came," she says, like she'd let herself doubt it despite everything. "I told you I would." He stops a few feet away, close enough to close the distance, far enough to let her be the one who decides if he should. "It's not finished the way I wanted it to be. She's gone. Han helped her disappear before I could stop it, and I let him because I trusted the wrong man at the wrong moment." Naomi's expression doesn't shift into panic the way he half expects. Instead, it settles into something steadier, the look of a woman who's spent a year and a half surviving worse odds than this. "Then we watch the horizon instead of the door. That's not new to me, Yiwon. I've been doing it since the day I walked into this house. You shouldn't have to do it anymore. Not for this. Not because of me." "I'm not doing it because of you." She reaches out, her fingers finding his. "I'm doing it because it's the truth, and running from a truth never made it smaller. She's out there. Fine, we'll be ready when she decides to matter again. But she doesn't get today. Today's not hers." Something in his chest loosens at that, not because the danger's gone, but because for the first time in longer than he can remember, he isn't carrying the weight of it by himself. "How are you?" he asks, underneath all of this, really. No one has asked him that question in years either, and hearing it turned back toward himself, asked by her, undoes something in his throat he doesn't have practice controlling. "Lighter," he says finally, and terrified both at once. Terrified of what? That I don't know how to do this part. He steps closer now, close enough that she has to tilt her chin up to hold his eyes. The part where nobody's lying to me, where I'm allowed to want something simple and it doesn't cost me an empire to have it, even with a threat still out there somewhere. Naomi reaches out first this time, her fingers finding the collar of his shirt, straightening something that doesn't need straightening, an excuse to touch him the way he'd used an excuse to walk the east wing at the hour she restocked linens. "It doesn't have to be complicated, Yiwon. It can just be this. You, me, and whatever comes for us met together instead of alone." "Say my name again." His voice is rough in a way it's never been in front of another living person. "Just my name, no title." "Yiwon." She says it soft, unguarded, the way she's never once let herself say it in 18 months of careful distance. And this time, when he closes the last inch between them, she doesn't tell him to wait. His hand slides into her hair, hers curls into the front of his shirt, and the kiss that follows carries the weight of everything neither of them was allowed to say out loud for a year and a half, patient, unhurried, and entirely certain. The kind of kiss that isn't an ending to a story but the quiet, steady beginning of one that's finally allowed to exist in daylight, threat or no threat waiting somewhere past the horizon. When they break apart, foreheads still touching, she smiles, really smiles, for the first time since she walked into this house. "For the record," she says, "I never once dropped a tray in my life." "I know." He laughs, an actual laugh, low and real, the first one this house has heard from him in years. "I never believed you did." The sun sits low over the harbor behind them, and for the first time since either of them can remember, neither one is watching the door out of fear. They're watching it together, on their own terms, ready for whoever walks through it next. "Queens, if you made it to the end of this one with me, I hope you're sitting with the same feeling I am, because Naomi never once asked this man to fight for her, and that's exactly why he did, and exactly why it mattered when it finally happened in daylight instead of the shadows she'd been surviving in for a year and a half. This isn't a clean ending. Vivian is still out there, and something tells me she isn't done. But tonight, in this house, the two people who deserved peace finally got a version of it. Before you go, tell me the truth. Do you think Yiwon should have trusted Han the way he did, or was that the one mistake that's going to come back for both of them? I want to hear where you land, because this is the kind of ending that stays with you long after the screen goes dark. If this story found its way into your chest tonight the way it found its way into mine while I wrote it, subscribe and stay close, because there's another woman out there right now living some version of Naomi's silence, and these stories are for her too. Like it if she stayed with you. Comment where you're watching from one more time before you go. And if she's the one who needs to hear this, the one still absorbing what she shouldn't have to absorb, still waiting for someone to finally see her, send this to her. Not because it grows anything, because she deserves to know somebody's telling her story, even if it's not her own yet.